The defendant is innocent. She could not have killed Richard Remington. Because on the night of the murder, she was in my bed.
No, this can't be happening.
The silence in the polished, wood-paneled courtroom didn't just fall, it choked every breath in the room. Seated at the defense table, Janelle Whitaker braced herself for a life sentence. She wore a modest, fitted gray long-sleeve dress with a crisp white collar, her dark hair pulled into a neat, low bun. Her deep brown skin was pale with exhaustion, her hands clasped tightly together as the wealthy Remington family smirked from the gallery. They had framed her, and they were going to get away with it. Then, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The air instantly turned freezing cold. Standing in the doorway was a tall Korean man in a long, structured black overcoat. Both of his forearms were visible beneath slightly rolled sleeves, revealing intricate black and gray wolf tattoos. Shin Woo-jae, the most feared mafia boss in the city, stepped inside. The smug faces of the Remingtons drained of color. What happens when a framed, helpless nanny becomes the obsession of the man who owns the shadows? Shin Woo-jae didn't just walk into the room, he eclipsed it. He didn't look at the sweating judge presiding over the rigged trial. He didn't spare a single glance for the panicked prosecutors frantically shuffling their papers. His intense, controlled eyes locked entirely on Janelle. He moved with a quiet, lethal authority. His dark hair styled neatly back to expose a sharp jawline and an expression that was calm, almost cold. He walked straight past the trembling armed bailiffs and stopped right beside the defense table. Every eye in the room was drawn to the intricately shaded black and gray wolf tattoos visible beneath the slightly rolled sleeves of his black dress shirt. They were the undisputed mark of the Wolf of Soul, the most ruthless, untouchable syndicate leader in the underground world. "The defendant is innocent," Woo-jae's voice boomed, deep and unwavering, vibrating against the heavy mahogany walls of the courtroom. "She could not have killed Richard Remington, because on the night of the murder she was in my bed." Gasps erupted from the crowded gallery. The judge hammered his gavel, but the sharp sound was instantly swallowed by the sheer chaos that followed. Reporters scrambled for their camera, while the smug, aristocratic faces of the Remington family instantly drained of color. Eleanor Remington clutched her pearl necklace, her manufactured grief entirely replaced by naked terror. Charles Remington physically shrank into his tailored suit. They had framed Janelle because she was convenient, disposable, and invisible. They assumed no one would ever fight for a humble, quiet nanny. But Woo-jae simply reached out his large, tattooed hand to Janelle. He didn't ask for permission. Janelle stared at his outstretched hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was terrified. Yet for the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't feel alone. The Remington family realized in one horrifying, world-shattering second that they hadn't just framed a nobody. They had awakened a monster. They had picked a fight with the wolf, a man who was fully prepared to burn their century-old empire to the ground just to keep her safe. Hello, family. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this intense, emotional roller coaster of betrayal and ultimate revenge, I need to know, where are you watching from? Drop your flag in the comments and hit subscribe if you love seeing corrupt, arrogant billionaires get exactly what they deserve when they mess with the wrong person. Now, let's proceed to the story. Rain lashed against the massive windows of the Remington mansion. Deep inside the quiet house, Janelle sat on her small bed, reading a paperback book. She loved the peaceful hours after the children went to sleep. But tonight, the silence was broken by angry shouting down the long hallway. It was Charles, the arrogant second son. His voice was shaking with panic. He was sweating and terrified, begging his father for millions of dollars to pay off a dangerous secret debt. "You have to help me, or they will kill me!" Charles screamed, his voice cracking. The old man's voice roared back, flatly refusing to give him a single dime. The argument grew louder, echoing violently off the expensive marble floors. Suddenly, a deafening gunshot ripped through the house. Janelle dropped her book, her eyes wide with fear. Her heart pounded in her chest like a trapped bird. She clamped a hand over her mouth and slid onto the floor, hiding in the dark corner of her room, paralyzed by pure terror. The heavy doors of the study flew open. Eleanor Remington stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the horror inside. Her wealthy husband lay lifeless on the expensive rug. Standing over him was Charles, his hands shaking violently, his custom shirt soaked in dark blood. Charles dropped the heavy silver pistol and fell to his knees, sobbing like a child. "I did not mean to do it, Mother. It was an accident," he cried. Eleanor did not scream. She did not cry for her dead husband. Instead, her sharp mind went to work. If the world found out, her family would lose their perfect reputation and their massive fortune. She stepped into the room and locked the door behind her. Eleanor looked at her ruined son, then slowly turned her cold eyes down the long, dark hallway. She stared straight at the closed door of the nanny's room. A wicked, calculating plan formed in her mind. Someone had to pay for this crime, and it would not be her son. Inside her tiny room, Janelle's hands shook wildly as she grabbed her phone to dial for help. Before she could press the buttons, the power suddenly cut out, plunging the room into darkness. While Janelle hid in the bathroom, Eleanor and Charles crept into her bedroom like shadows. Charles slipped the bloody pistol deep beneath Janelle's mattress, while Eleanor stuffed a thick leather bag full of stolen cash into the back of her small closet. They moved quickly and silently, leaving no trace behind. 10 minutes later, police sirens wailed as bright red and blue lights flashed across the mansion walls. When the officers kicked down the front door, they found Eleanor and Charles in the hallway. But the mother and son put on an award-winning performance. Eleanor wailed in fake agony while Charles held her, acting like a broken, grieving son. The police rushed past them, entirely fooled by the rich family's tears, heading straight toward the only other person awake in the house, the innocent nanny. Flashing camera lights blinded Janelle as rough police officers dragged her out the front doors. She was still wearing her simple pajamas, crying and begging them to listen. And cold metal handcuffs cut deeply into her wrists. By morning, her face was on every news channel in the country. The media quickly painted the quiet nanny as a greedy, ungrateful monster who killed a good man for his money. Reporters swarmed the Remington family, hanging on to their every word. Standing on her massive porch, Eleanor wiped away a fake tear. "We trusted her," Eleanor lied smoothly to the cameras. "We treated her like family and she destroyed us." The public was furious. The system moved brutally fast to crush the helpless woman. When Janelle finally stood in court, she had no hope. The judge, who secretly played golf with the Remingtons, slammed his heavy wooden gavel down. He coldly denied Janelle bail, ensuring the innocent woman would sit in a damp, freezing jail cell until her trial began. Weeks of endless terror led to this moment. Janelle sat at the defense table in a modest gray dress, her spirit completely crushed. The heavy courtroom air felt thick and suffocating. Next to her, a cheap public defender flipped through his notes with zero interest. He leaned over and whispered coldly, "Just plead guilty. It is the only way to avoid the death penalty. You cannot win against them." Janelle stared at the wooden table, her eyes totally empty. In front of her, in the packed gallery, the Remington family sat together like royalty. They wore expensive custom suits and perfect hairstyles. Maid Charles leaned back in his wooden bench, a nasty smirk playing on his lips as the angry prosecutor pointed a finger at Janelle. The lawyer loudly called her a vicious killer, destroying her character for the jury. Nobody in the room believed her. She was entirely alone, trapped in a nightmare created by billionaires, waiting for the judge to throw her life away forever. The heavy wooden gavel hovered in the air. The judge looked down with cold eyes, asking if the defense had any final words before the sentence. Janelle closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She was ready for her life to end. Suddenly, a massive crash shook the room. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst wide open. The warm air instantly turned freezing cold. Every person in the gallery gasped and turned around. Standing in the doorway was a tall Korean man. His long black overcoat flowed behind him like a dark shadow. Beneath his rolled-up sleeves, dark wolf tattoos covered his strong arms. Shin Woo-jae, the terrifying leader of the city's underworld, stepped inside. The smug smiles on the Remingtons' faces vanished in a heartbeat. The powerful boss walked straight past the confused guards and stopped right beside Janelle. He looked up at the sweating judge and spoke with a voice like thunder. "She is innocent. She was with me." The angry prosecutor slammed his hands on his table, his face turning bright red. He loudly mocked the dangerous man, demanding solid proof to back up this wild claim. Shin Woo-jae did not blink or show any anger. He stood tall and perfectly calm. With a tiny wave of his hand, he signaled a quiet associate waiting by the door. The helper quickly rolled a large television screen into the middle of the quiet courtroom. He pressed a button, and a clear security video began to play. The bright screen showed the grand hallway of a famous luxury hotel. The timestamp matched the exact minute of the murder. The whole courtroom watched in pure shock as the video clearly showed Janelle walking into Woo-jae's private suite. It was a completely fake video, cleverly made by experts, but it looked totally real. The trap set by the Remingtons was completely shattered. Janelle stared at the screen, her heart racing as she realized this terrifying stranger was saving her life. The courtroom was dead silent. The judge nervously wiped cold sweat from his forehead. He could feel Woo-jae staring straight through him with deadly, unblinking eyes. Trembling, the judge banged his gavel down and loudly dismissed the entire case. Janelle sat frozen in her wooden chair, entirely trapped in a state of shock. Across the room, Eleanor and Charles Remington jumped up in furious anger, screaming that it was all a lie. But nobody listened to them anymore. Without saying a word, Woo-jae took off his long, dark overcoat. He gently wrapped the warm material around Janelle's shaking shoulders. The heavy coat smelled like clean rain and expensive cologne. He placed a strong, tattooed hand softly on her back, guiding her toward the exit. The thick crowd parted in fear to let them through. Outside, dozens of bright camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Woo-jae shielded her tired face from the bright lights, easily leading her away from the corrupt courtroom and into his dangerous, unknown world. Rain began to fall as they climbed into the back of a massive, bulletproof black car. The heavy doors shut, locking out the noise of the screaming reporters. Inside, the quiet luxury felt like a different universe. Janelle pulled the oversized coat tighter around herself. She shrank back against the leather door, putting as much space as possible between herself and the famous crime boss. Her heart hammered wildly in her chest. She looked at his sharp side profile and finally found her voice. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice shaking with fear. "I do not even know who you are." Shin Woo-jae did not turn his head right away. He kept his dark eyes locked on the passing city lights. His strong jaw tightened for a brief second before he finally looked at her. His scary, intense face softened in the dim light of the car. "You do not remember me," he said in a low, gentle voice. "But I remember you." Her mind instantly flashed back to one stormy night exactly a year ago. Janelle had been taking out the trash behind the massive Remington estate. In the dark, pouring rain, she found a tall man bleeding heavily in the dirty alley. She knew she could not save him by herself. Acting fast, she dragged his heavy body into the hidden greenhouse. She desperately called her cousin, a smart hospital nurse who hated dealing with dangerous street violence. But her cousin came anyway to help. Together, they hid the stranger in the damp darkness. Her cousin worked fast, expertly stitching up the deep, nasty knife wound on his side while Janelle held a flashlight. Janelle never asked the quiet, bleeding man for his real name. She never asked who hurt him or why he carried a gun. She just cleaned his blood and saved his life. She never knew that the injured man was the wolf of soul, and that he had been secretly watching over her ever since that night. The massive black car pulled up to a towering, heavily guarded modern estate. High concrete walls and armed men surrounded the fortress. Shin Woo-jae guided Janelle inside the grand house. It was a place of quiet, sharp luxury. A young, polite maid quickly stepped forward and bowed, offering to draw a warm bath and unpack Janelle's few belongings. Instantly, Janelle panicked. Her breathing turned fast and shallow. She stepped backward, gripping her small bag tightly. For her entire life, she was the one who served others. Having someone bow to her felt completely wrong and overwhelming. Seeing her frozen in fear, Woo-jae gently raised his hand. He softly dismissed the confused maids, sending them away with a single look. Once they were alone in the giant hallway, he turned to her. His dark, dangerous eyes were filled with unexpected warmth. "You are not a servant here, Janelle," he said, though his deep voice carrying total respect. "This is your home now, and you are my equal." Miles away from the safe fortress, pure panic destroyed the Remington mansion. Eleanor Remington paced across her expensive rugs, her face pale with horror. The quiet, invisible nanny they framed was no longer a nobody. She was now guarded by a terrifying titan who could destroy their wealthy family in seconds. Eleanor nervously twisted her diamond ring, finally realizing the deadly mistake they had made. In the next room, Charles was completely falling apart. He violently threw a crystal glass against the wall, shattering it into tiny pieces. His phone buzzed endlessly with threatening messages from dangerous criminals. The people he owed a massive drug debt to wanted their millions right now. But because of the botched, highly public trial, the police had frozen all of the family's inheritance money. Charles grabbed his hair, sweating in absolute terror. They had tried to frame Janelle to save his miserable life, but instead, they had accidentally locked themselves inside a deadly trap with no way out. Early the next morning, the giant house was totally quiet. Janelle tiptoed into the massive, shiny kitchen. She felt useless just sitting around, so she started pulling out pans to cook a simple breakfast. Suddenly, Woo-jae walked into the room. He was not wearing his scary black overcoat. Instead, he wore a simple dark shirt. Seeing her working, he gently took the metal pan right out of her hands. Without a word, he rolled up his sleeves, fully revealing the detailed dark wolf tattoos covering his muscular forearms. He began to cook for her, moving with surprising grace. Janelle watched in silent shock as the most feared boss in the city made her eggs and toast. They sat together at the small kitchen island, sharing a warm, quiet meal. There were no servants, no guards, and no shouting. For the first time in her difficult life, Janelle felt completely safe. As he poured her coffee, the thick ice around her broken heart finally began to melt. The feeling of safety did not last long. Later that afternoon, Janelle turned on the large television in the living room. Her heart dropped into her stomach. A famous news anchor was loudly laughing, calling Janelle a dirty mob mistress who tricked a billionaire. Deep shame flushed her cheeks. She felt sick, at wanting to hide from the cruel world again. But Woo-jae walked in and saw the painful tears in her eyes. His face turned to cold stone. He did not comfort her with empty words. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made one short, quiet phone call. Less than an hour later, the live news broadcast suddenly stopped. The arrogant anchor looked completely terrified as he read a breaking news update on his screen. Woo-jae had just bought the entire television network with cash. And he fired the cruel man right there on live television. Janelle gasped in shock. He looked at her, silently proving that absolutely nobody would ever disrespect her again. Janelle realized she could not hide behind his protection forever. She marched straight into Woo-jae's private gym, her dark eyes blazing with a newly found fire. She was entirely tired of being a helpless victim. "Teach me how to fight," she demanded firmly. Woo-jae looked at her serious face, deeply respecting her bravery. He nodded and wrapped her soft hands in thick training tape. For the next hour, they engaged in an intense, close-contact workout. He showed her how to punch, block, and stand her ground. Her breathing grew heavy and sweat dotted her forehead. Suddenly, she lost her balance on the soft gym mat. Wu-jae quickly reached out, catching her waist to stop her from falling. Their bodies pressed tightly together. The loud world faded away. The heavy romantic tension that had been growing between them finally snapped. Wu-jae looked down at her lips, his dark eyes filled with fierce desire. Slowly, he leaned in, and they shared their first, breathtakingly passionate kiss. Charles Remington was completely out of time and drowning in blind panic. Sweating and desperate, he paid a cheap local street gang to attack Wu-jae's massive iron gates. Late at night, loud gunfire echoed outside the fortress. It was a pathetic, failed attempt that did absolutely no real damage. But the foolish attack completely enraged the wolf. Wu-jae's pale skin tightened with pure fury. His intense eyes turned pitch black as he grabbed his heavy coat, fully prepared to slaughter every single person involved. He wanted to burn the Remington family to ashes that very night. Suddenly, Janelle stepped firmly in front of him, pressing her hands flat against his solid chest. She looked up at his sharp jawline, no longer afraid. "What? No," she demanded softly, but with absolute iron strength. "Death is too fast. I want them ruined legally and publicly so the whole world can see their total shame." Wu-jae paused, breathing heavily, before finally nodding in deep respect. He agreed to do it her way. The scared, quiet Nanny was completely gone. The next morning, Janelle proudly stepped out wearing a sharp, tailored black suit that perfectly complemented her deep brown skin. My Wu-jae had bought her a brand new wardrobe built for a powerful boss. Taking total charge of her own revenge, she marched into the estate's high-tech security room. Sitting alongside Wu-jae's elite team of silent computer hackers, she began digging deep into Charles's hidden bank records. For hours, she stared at the glowing screens, tracking every single dollar the arrogant son had spent. Suddenly, her expressive features froze. She found exactly what she was looking for. Huge. Secret payments had been sent out every week, abruptly stopping right before the murder. She discovered Charles had a massive, deadly drug debt. The final puzzle pieces clicked together perfectly in her mind. Charles killed his own father because he was completely out of money, and Eleanor framed the innocent Nanny just to protect her guilty, worthless son from going to prison. Trying desperately to save their destroyed public image, the Remington family hosted a massive and expensive charity gala at a famous downtown hotel. The grand ballroom was packed with wealthy, important people. Suddenly, the loud music completely stopped. The heavy double doors swung open, and the elite crowd instantly parted in pure terror. Shin Wu-jae and Janelle boldly crashed the exclusive party. Wu-jae looked incredibly dangerous in a perfectly fitted black suit, his dark hair styled neatly back. Walking right beside him, Janelle looked like an untouchable queen. She wore a breathtaking, sleek silver gown that hugged her figure, with a massive, sparkling diamond necklace resting against her deep brown skin. Everyone stared in complete shock as the powerful couple slowly walked into the center of the room. Across the sparkling ballroom, Eleanor Remington turned around and saw the woman she had cruelly thrown in jail. The arrogant mother gasped loudly, and her hand shaking so badly that she dropped her expensive crystal champagne glass straight onto the marble floor. The crashing sound of the broken glass echoed loudly in the totally silent room. Janelle did not flinch or look away. Leaving Wu-jae standing calmly by the doors, she slowly walked across the ballroom floor. Her silver dress sparkled under the bright chandeliers. Step by step, she forced a terrified Eleanor backward until the wealthy woman was completely trapped against a cold marble wall. A few weeks ago, Janelle would have been crying and screaming for justice, but now she stood tall and powerful. Looking down at the shaking woman, Janelle spoke with a chilling, deadly calmness that she had directly learned from the feared mafia boss. "You thought I was just a nobody," Janelle whispered coldly, her deep brown eyes locking onto Eleanor's terrified face. "You threw me to the wolves, Eleanor, just to save your guilty son, but you made a massive mistake." Janelle leaned in closer, a terrifying, confident smile slowly spreading across her beautiful face. "Now, the wolf is truly here." After the disastrous charity gala, Charles was officially completely out of time. His dangerous creditors sent him a final, terrifying warning. They promised to kill him before the sun came up if he did not pay his massive debt immediately. Always sweating and crying in pure panic, Charles made the worst mistake of his miserable life. Late that night, he managed to sneak onto the edge of the massive Wu estate. Using the very last of his hidden cash, he successfully bribed a single greedy rogue guard to open a heavy side door. Charles crept quietly through the dark, modern hallways like a cornered rat. His hands shook violently as he clutched a loaded gun to his chest. His twisted, foolish plan was to find the quiet nanny and violently hold her hostage. He thought he could easily force Wu Jie to pay off his $1 million drug debt in exchange for Janelle's safety. He had absolutely no idea that he was walking straight into his own grave. The dark library was completely silent until the heavy oak door clicked shut. Janelle turned around and gasped. Charles stood there, sweating and shaking, pointing a silver gun right at her head. A month ago, the quiet nanny would have frozen in pure terror. But she was not that scared girl anymore. Charles lunged forward to grab her arm. Moving fast, Janelle remembered the intense gym training. She quickly twisted her body, grabbing his wrist with both hands, and pulled him forward hard. Charles stumbled off balance. With a powerful kick to his knee, Janelle sent the arrogant billionaire crashing down onto the hard wooden floor. The gun slid away into the dark corners of the room. Just as Charles cried out in pain, the library doors exploded open. Shin Wu Jie burst inside like a dark storm, his intense eyes blazing with deadly fury as he saw the pathetic man on the floor. Wu Jie's massive guards dragged Charles up by his expensive collar. The ruined billionaire sobbed loudly, blood dripping from his nose. "Please do not kill me," Charles screamed in blind panic. "I can pay the money. Just let me call the Viper clan right now." A sudden, chilling silence fell over the room. Then Wu Jie laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound that made Janelle shiver. "You foolish boy," Wu Jie said softly, his deep voice dripping with poison. "The Viper clan works for me." Charles completely froze in horror. His deadly drug debt belonged to the Wolf's massive syndicate this entire time. Wu Jie stepped closer, looking down at the crying man. "You owed me millions. So, I bugged your giant house months ago to track my money." Wu Jie pulled a small silver drive from his coat. "I have crystal clear audio of you shooting your own father and your wicked mother planning to frame my quiet nanny." The crushing weight of the massive secret hit Janelle all at once. The arrogant Remington family had framed a completely innocent woman, totally unaware that the dangerous man they owed millions of dollars to was listening to every word they said. Janelle stared at the small silver drive in Wu Jie's tattooed hand. Her heart raced wildly as the unbelievable truth fully sank in. Wu Jie had the solid evidence to free her from jail long before her unfair trial even started. He never needed to crash the quiet courtroom or show a fake hotel video, but he chose to do it anyway. He used that highly public moment in front of the judge and cameras to make a terrifying, powerful statement to the entire city. He wanted the whole world to know that Janelle belonged completely to the Wolf of Soul, and absolutely nobody could ever touch her again without facing his deadly wrath. Charles was dragged away screaming into the dark night. Once the quiet library was totally empty, Wu Jie slowly turned back to Janelle. His cold expression softened as he looked deeply into her bright brown eyes. Gently, he reached out and placed the tiny silver drive right into the palm of her soft hand. He closed her fingers tightly around it. "Their wealthy lives are completely in your hands now," Wu Jie whispered, his deep voice filled with pure respect. "You decide how this story ends." Janelle looked down at the cold metal. A few months ago, she would have simply handed it to the local police and hidden away. But she had learned perfectly from the wolf. She did not hesitate for a single second. Walking straight to the expensive computer desk, she plugged the drive in. With one confident push of a button, she sent the crystal-clear murder audio to every major news station in the entire country. The very next morning, the entire country woke up to the explosive, shocking truth. Massive FBI trucks smashed through the tall iron gates of the famous Remington mansion. Dozens of heavily armed agents swarmed the huge, expensive property like angry bees. The loud sirens echoed across the wealthy neighborhood. Inside, Eleanor Remington screamed wildly as rough officers slapped cold metal handcuffs tightly around her wrists. Her perfect hair was a total mess, and her expensive silk robe dragged on the dirty ground. She cried loudly for her expensive lawyers, but nobody listened. Charles sobbed like a frightened child as they pushed him into the back of a police car. Bright camera flashes exploded everywhere as live news crews filmed the total ruin of the arrogant family. They were publicly dragged out of their own home in pure shame, the exact same brutal way they had cruelly dragged the innocent Nanny out months before. The crowded courtroom felt completely different this time. Janelle did not sit at the lonely defense table. Instead, she sat proudly in the gallery wearing a stunning, expensive designer coat. Shin Woo-jae sat right beside her, his strong, tattooed arm wrapped protectively around her waist. Across the room, Charles and Eleanor Remington looked completely broken. The heavy wooden gavel slammed down with a loud crack. True justice finally arrived. The judge looked at the solid evidence and gave Charles life in prison without any chance of parole for the brutal murder of his father. Eleanor began sobbing loudly as the judge spoke to her next. Stripped of her massive wealth, the arrogant mother received 25 years for hiding evidence and helping a killer. The strict sentence made sure she would spend the rest of her natural life locked behind thick iron bars. Janelle watched the guards drag the crying billionaires away, feeling totally free at last. With the wicked family locked in prison, the huge Remington estate was quickly seized by the government. The massive mansion was put up for a public auction. Without blinking an eye, Woo-jae easily bought the entire property using huge stacks of cash. Later that evening, while he walked into their quiet living room and gently handed the official property deed straight to Janelle. "It belongs completely to you now," he said in his deep, smooth voice. "You can burn it down or keep it." Janelle looked down at the piece of paper that used to represent her worst nightmare. She did not want the cursed house to stand anymore, but she did not want to destroy it out of pure anger either. She smiled softly and made a brilliant choice. Janelle ordered the giant mansion to be completely bulldozed to the ground. In its place, she built a beautiful charity hospital specially designed to help other wrongfully accused people rebuild their broken lives. Months later, Woo-jae took Janelle far away from the noisy city and his dangerous underground life. They walked together along a completely private, peaceful beach. The warm ocean waves gently crashed against the white sand under a beautiful golden sunset. Janelle felt totally relaxed, wearing a flowing white dress that blew in the soft ocean breeze. Suddenly, Woo-jae stopped walking and gently took both of her soft hands. The terrifying wolf of soul, a man who commanded thousands of dangerous men, slowly dropped down to one knee in the sand. For the very first time, the ruthless mafia boss showed his total vulnerability. He looked up into her deep brown eyes, pulling out a sparkling diamond ring. He softly asked the beautiful former nanny to be his forever queen. Tears of pure joy filled Janelle's eyes as she smiled brightly and quickly said yes. He pulled her into a warm, passionate hug as the sun set perfectly behind them. 3 beautiful years quickly passed. The grand wedding between the powerful wolf and his beautiful queen was remembered as the greatest event of the decade. Now, their busy lives were finally filled with pure peace. The deep brown-skinned woman was no longer a frightened girl running from cruel billionaires. Janelle walked slowly through the massive, sunlit garden of their modern fortress. Bright, colorful flowers bloomed happily all around her. She looked totally radiant and powerful. The heavy fear that used to crush her chest was completely gone forever. Whenever she walked through the huge estate, the tough security guards quickly bowed their heads. So she was deeply respected by the entire underground syndicate, not just because she was the boss's wife, but because of her own brave heart. She took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, feeling incredibly thankful for the amazing, safe life she had built out of the dark ashes of her painful past. Janelle smiled warmly as she reached the center of the green garden. Shin Woo-jae was sitting comfortably on a soft blanket spread across the bright grass. His heavy suit jacket was completely off and his sleeves were rolled up, fully showing his dark wolf tattoos in the warm sunlight. He looked incredibly peaceful as he carefully held their beautiful newborn twins, a tiny boy and a sweet girl. Janelle walked over and sat down right next to the powerful man who had saved her life. She gently rested her head against his strong shoulder, watching their precious babies sleep safely in his protective arms. Woo-jae leaned down and softly kissed the top of her dark hair. They were a perfectly safe, intensely loyal family built from the ugly ashes of a cruel betrayal. Janelle closed her eyes, knowing she would never be invisible or alone again. The screen slowly fades to black on their perfect happily ever after. The story of Janelle and the Wolf of Soul reminds us of one powerful truth. Your current position does not determine your ultimate destination. The Remingtons mistook Janelle's silence for weakness and her humble job for powerlessness. They thought she was disposable, but they learned the hard way that when you try to bury the innocent in the dark, you only plant the seeds for their ultimate rise. The greatest lesson here is to never let anyone make you feel invisible. No matter how much money or power someone has, they do not get to determine your worth. Sometimes, the cruelest betrayals and the darkest storms are just setting the stage for your greatest triumph. Keep your heart pure, stand firm in the truth, and remember, you are never truly alone. If Janelle's breathtaking journey from a framed nanny to an untouchable queen inspired you today, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that true justice always wins. I want to hear from you. What was your absolute favorite moment or plot twist in this story? Let me know down in the comments. If you want more emotional roller coasters, sweet revenge, and stories where the underdog comes out on top, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.